Okay, today we're going to look at how to do quadratic graphs on your calculator. So we'll start with an example and we'll go through each of the parts. So the first thing on your calculator, you want to type in y equals 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. So go to your y equals button, type all that in, hit graph, and your graph should show up. If your graph is skewed, so sometimes your window setting is messed up so you don't see the normal graph. So our normal window setting, we should go from negative 10 to positive 10 in the x direction, and from negative 10 to positive 10 in the y direction. If your window isn't set like that, you can go to the window button and actually put those numbers in. So you want to see it to go from negative 10 for x minimum, positive 10 for x maximum. The scale is 1. That just shows how many ticks it is, so you don't need to worry about that. And then do your y minimum and y maximum as 10, and then leave the other ones as 1 as well. So if you have that, that's your normal window setting. You can change it manually, or if you hit zoom and then go to standard, so number 6, Z standard, it'll reset it to be that automatically. Okay? So that's the first step. Get your window, make sure it's set right, hit graph, and then your calculator should sketch out the graph for you, and in this case the graph does something like that. Okay, so now just like we did before, we want to find out all of the key points. So we're looking for what are the x-intercepts. So in this case we're looking for those two intersection points, those two x-intercepts there. We also want to know what is the y-intercept, which would be right there. And the other key part to the graph that's often asked is, what is the vertex? And the vertex is just going to be the peak of the graph, either the maximum or the minimum, depending on how the graph is. So for this example, the vertex would be the bottom part, it would be that minimum part of the graph. So we're looking for each of those. So when you're doing these questions, you've got a few different options on your calculator. The easiest way, but it's probably the least accurate, is to use the trace button. Okay, so if on your calculator you hit trace, it gives you a little cursor, and you can just kind of move your cursor around to get it as close as you can to each of those points. So when I do that, I get about 1.06 for this x-intercept, and if I trace down, I'm getting around -5 for the y-intercept, and it looks like our vertex is probably around somewhere about there, so -0.64, and the y-coordinate is -6.1. Okay, each of these, remember, are coordinates, so our x-coordinate would be that and 0, and our y-coordinate would be 0, -5, so let me write those in. And then our last one, if we use trace, go over to our first x-intercept, and it looks like it's around -2.5. Okay, it's not giving us exactly 0 because that's the problem with trace. It's going to give you the best approximates. So it'll give you an approximate value, which in some cases is good enough. If it's a multiple choice question, you might be able just to need the approximate to be able to match the best answer, and you're done. But typically we're not going to use trace very often just because it isn't accurate enough. It's giving you the nearest pixel, not necessarily the actual answer. So what we want to do on your calculator is use the calc button. So on your calculator, you want calc, which is right above trace. So you got to go second and then hit calc. And each of those, there's 4 different things. The first 4 that are listed will give us these 4 points. So the first one we're going to do is value. So calc value, basically what that does, it lets you put in an x and gives you the corresponding y coordinate. So the only x coordinate that we know for sure is our x-intercept. Our y-intercept. We know that on a graph, the y-intercept has to have an x of 0 because it's right on the y line. So when you go to second calc value, put in 0 for x, and it gives you an automatically y of -5. So second calc value works awesome to find the y-intercept. It's really easy and it's also fast. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one on your list, if you go back to second calc, go to number 2 on the list, it is 0. And the 0 is just a different word or a fancy word for saying x-intercepts. So 0 also can be used, the word root is also used, which also basically means x-intercepts. Okay, so that's what we want to use in order to get the x-intercept. So number 2 is 0, number 1 was value. So the first one gives you y-intercepts, second one gives you x-intercepts. So pick 0, and your calculator does a little bit of a weird thing. It asks for a left boundary. So what that means is you have to sort of tell the calculator which 0 you want. So you have to tell it the left and the right boundary of each 0. So let's do the first one. Okay, so our first 0, let's go over to the left part of the graph here. So we're looking for this one that's roughly at negative 2.55. What we have to do is we have to go left of that line. So if you're imagining drawing this graph from left to right, the left side of the line will be somewhere above it, and then the right side of that 0 will be somewhere below it. So that's all you have to do, is you just got to move your cursor, get above the line somewhere, hit enter, move the cursor down below the line, hit enter again, and it gives us the exact 0 of negative 2.5 and 0. So you can see our trace, we got negative 2.55, that was close, but the actual answer is exactly negative 2.5. Okay, so we've got our first 0. Now we want to get the other one. We've got to basically do the exact same thing again. So you'll go back to your calculator, go second calc 0, move your cursor over to this time we want this other one. So we're going to have to go on the left side of it, which will be below the line. So go somewhere below, hit enter, then go somewhere above, hit enter again, and it gives us an answer of 10. So once again, you can see when we traced it, we got 1.06. That was pretty close, but not close enough. Our exact answer is positive 1. Okay, so we've got our y-intercept exact. We've now got our 2 x-intercepts exact. So the only one we have left is vertex. So on your calculator, you can calculate that one as well. All you have to do is choose either number 3 or number 4. So when you go to second calc, you have minimum or maximum. They both work the same, it just depends on which way the graph goes. So in this case, because the graph is opening up, our vertex is a minimum, so that's the one we want to pick. So we're going to go second calc minimum, hit enter, and now it's going to ask for the left and right of that minimum. So you want to go somewhere to the left of the peak, and then go somewhere to the right, so somewhere over there, hit enter again, and it gives us the exact location of the minimum, which is negative 0.75 and negative 6.125. Okay, so once again you can see our trace, we're close, but not exact. Okay, so that's it. So when you're using your calculator, you just basically want to use those second calc buttons to get those exact answers for the graph. Okay, so there's our 4 values. Our vertex, we use maximum or minimum. It doesn't matter which one you use, it just depends on the graph. So if our graph was drawn upside down, then to calculate that vertex, we'd use second calc maximum and go left and right. Or for zeros, the x-intercepts, go second calc 0, go left and right for each. And for value, that's the best one to use, the y-intercept. Just plug in a 0, and that'll give you the correct y-intercept. And that's all for today.